Okay, so we're setting off in this beautiful 2018 Mediterranean Blue X1 28i xDrive. The X1 is the entry-level BMW SUV at this time. It doesn't feel all that downscale. It has competitors that are much inferior to the BMW in terms of fit and finish and the quality of these cars for that price point. BMW's been doing different things with some of their models, and they've been going to a lot of turbocharging. And this car is no different than some of the other models that they've been featuring turbocharged engines. This one here happens to feature a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder engine with a turbocharged strap to it, producing about 228 horsepower and about 258 foot-pounds of torque at a broad RPM range of about 1500 RPM up to about 4500 RPM. So it gives the car a very usable range for performance. Now with that, all that performance can still be coupled to the 7 liters per 100 kilometers on the highway and about 10 liters per 100 kilometers in the city, which makes this car also very economical as well as fun to drive. Now I can tell you that the power band in this car is very linear, as you would expect from most BMW engines. Straight 6 engines that BMW used to produce in a lot of their cars is actually, you know, very linear by nature, and this car, even with a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, is also very linear. BMW states a 0 to 60 mile per hour time of about 8 seconds flat. So let's test the theory whether this car actually does that 8 seconds. Here we go. Starting now. There we are. So it was brisk, to say the least. The car definitely has enough zing to go along with this. It's not exactly awe-inspiring, but it is enough to give you, decent passing power at will. It's not short on enough passing power. This is not your M5, but it is enough to get up and go, get around that slow piece of traffic. And as well, again, you've got to remember the intent of this vehicle is slightly leaning towards economy, and so the power is going to be given a little bit back for the sake of economy. So also coupled to that beautiful little 4-cylinder engine, we have an 8-speed automatic transmission, which is a great complement to this engine, because with an 8-speed transmission and a 4-cylinder engine that has turbocharging strapped to it, we know that turbocharging or turbo lag can be a factor, as well as at really low RPM, if you're caught in the wrong gear, that can sometimes leave a car feeling flat-footed. But with this car, with the 8-speed automatic transmission, it's a great coupling, because the 8-speed ensures you're always in the right gear for that passing power or that passing maneuver that you're trying to perform. Now as well, this car has other features to it. We're talking about leather seats, which is nice. We have the latest version of the iDrive system down here, which is also nice. It's fresher, more up to date, and of course that couples up to your screen up here, which is more the trend now, of course, versus the built-in screen. Everybody's doing this now, from BMW, Audi. They're all creating this type of interface, which is very nice and fresh. Has nicer tones to it as well. It's very bright and fresh, like I said. This car also has a lot of the standard features, like all the power windows and locks and mirrors and all that stuff that you would expect from a BMW. But this car, if you look above, actually has a panoramic sunroof, which is actually very large. You activate that, and it not only opens up the space for you, the driver, or the front passenger, but it also allows a lot of lighting for the back passengers. And you also have a few different settings available for driving dynamics. You hit the button below here and you can toggle that between Sport, Eco, Pro, and Standard driving. And of course I activate that, and looking up at the screen above, you toggle that, you can get Sport driving dynamics. You can toggle that, go to Comfort mode and Eco Pro, which changes it to the most efficient driving dynamics. Of course, it's not going to be the sportiest driving experience, but it does allow you for the maximum economical performance out of the vehicle. We also have, obviously you can disable your traction control, which most vehicles you can do that for a little more fun-spirited driving on a racetrack. We also have, which I mentioned, the Sport Economy programming that you can make an adjustment to. But also here you have the drive the downhill assist, and that helps you uphill or downhill, and it maintains the vehicle's speed at a minimal speed on hills, as well as it holds you from rolling backwards on a steep incline. If you're trying to take off, it's a great option to have. It ensures the vehicle holds stability before you're actually taking off. It allows you to basically release the brake, transition to the gas, and it supports that, so you don't have a situation where you're rolling back and bumping into the traffic behind you. So what I like about this is this new iDrive system. It is so adjustable. You can go through driving dynamics. You can do these, have a look at the sport displays, and you can see basically what kind of power you're providing here. This is a beautiful option here. You can check out the foot-pounds and the horsepower that this vehicle is producing. You can back out, and we can go into other features like vehicle status. We'll see what the flat tire monitor is doing. We can, you're able to basically utilize the iDrive for almost every function of the vehicle. So number one, first thing I love about this new X1 is the interface, and the whole iDrive system in general is much, much better than previous generations. And I'll give you one of the things that I really like about it. Really like are the driving displays that you can get out of this. And one of them, of course, is the sports display. It actually has a drag on, tells you where you maxed out. But as you accelerate, you can see I love that sport display. Another thing I love about this X1 happens to be the panoramic sunroof. What you got to realize is a lot of vehicles in this price point do not have these extras. Things like the panoramic. Some of them will have sunroofs and some of them won't. But this one has a full-on panoramic sunroof, which gives you lots of light. And the other thing I like is that if this is the kind of car that you're looking for, and it happens to be a BMW, but you don't necessarily want to break the bank in terms of fuel economy and the economical side of this vehicle, you're able to dial in economical settings. You can drive this car in a more economical fashion. But why? Because you have a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine that produces a significant amount of horsepower, but it does it with a smaller engine. This happens to be the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and it gets great fuel economy. So it gets, as I mentioned in my last video, 10 liters per 100 kilometers in the city and 7 liters per 100 kilometers in the highway. The fuel economy is the third thing I love immensely about this. So the fourth thing I like about this car, this segment produces cars that are very bland often, but a lot of the vehicles that are kind of almost the subcompact, the mini SUVs as it were, like you'd find here in the X1, often have everything else is scaled down. And a lot of that are seats, for example. But that's what I love about this car. When I look at the seats here, they actually have a lot of bolstering here. And this car makes it very sporty. And as I mentioned before, the sporting appeal of the car is certainly there. These bolsters actually keep you in place very, very nicely. And I love these seats. They feel like there's something that belongs almost in an M3. Keep you locked in for relatively sporty driving. It's not your mainstream everyday ho-hum cars. It actually provides some nice bolster support. And of course, the fifth thing that I love about this car, and that is the sheer quality, the feel of the car. Now we know this is the base model. The X1 is the low-end model of the series of the X models in the BMW world. But that doesn't mean they totally skimp out. And BMW still does a great job of providing high quality materials like you find on the dashboard here. This really nice soft touch textured material that is, gives you a nice sense of quality. You also have this beautiful high gloss, nice finish, almost sort of a piano gloss look here as accents. Every button and control feels of high quality. The buttons are small, but they feel nicely put together. We talk about the seats. The seats, we have leather interior. We have this with stitching around as accent. The overall look is a very high quality. And that's one thing, getting in an X1, being that it's the low-end model, you would almost expect low-end finishing. but you don't have low-end finishing. You actually have something that feels like of reasonable quality even for a BMW. 5 things that I hate about this car. So the first thing, BMW like to be a bit of a trendsetter in terms of technology, and their styling even often, while it is sometimes found to be a little conservative, they always like to focus on the key points that people really like, and that's the performance touches. You know, a lot of their cars have carbon fiber, spoilers, big wheel packages, and all that kind of stuff. This car brings me to the first point, small wheels. And not only that, if you look at the side profile, they've pulled the wheels in a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit fussy, maybe I'm being a little fussy, but I find the wheels a little bit undersized for this car. The second thing I'm not a real favor of, because this car has a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. Yes, it has a turbocharger, and yes, it has 240 horsepower, which seems like a reasonable amount of power. But because ultimately it is still a 4-cylinder engine, I find it still feels a little bit sluggish at times. Yes, it gets up and goes not too bad. But because we're talking about a performance number of 0 to 60 in 8 seconds flat, that no longer is inspiring. 8 seconds, 0 to 60, there are vans that do that. Pickup trucks are faster than that these days. So I find 8 seconds to 0 to 60 miles per hour is very not awe-inspiring, and is, as a matter of fact, I find a little bit dull. So the third thing that I really don't like too much about it, you know, it is a BMW. You know, you start to expect certain things from a BMW, and maybe I'm spoiled, but hey, you know what? I think there's a shortcoming here. Now, if you look down at the bottom here, this is the back seat area. Look at the basic. We don't even really have heater controls. There's no really anything adjustable back there. There's definitely nothing in terms of, you know, heated seats or any of that stuff. I mean, that's beyond, but there's not even adjustable heating controls here other than basically turn the vents on or off. And the only thing you have is one outlet for a potential electronic component that you might plug in. But it's very basic back here. There's trim that you would expect out of, you know, something like a base 4-cylinder RAV4 or something, not necessarily out of a BMW. So that kind of turns me off. So there was another thing that caught me off guard with this car. I was actually in the trunk of the car. I was going through there checking out what the storage space looked like. And while I had my head tucked in the trunk of the X1, lo and behold, the trunk started closing and slammed down on my back. Oh, what was that? I thought that was a little bit odd. I'm not sure if the sensing equipment is not calibrated or something's not right there. Now, I didn't get hurt. It didn't hit me hard. But the point was, I could have been in there loading groceries, or what if I was changing the baby's diaper in the trunk? So BMW, if that's a problem, maybe you've heard there's a problem there, you might want to take a look at that. That could cause a potential issue. So the fifth and last thing, and that has to do with the body styling. Look at the exterior, specifically on the back of the car. It's not an ugly vehicle. I think it's overall relatively attractive. The front end is okay. You know, from the side profile, it's not a bad looking vehicle. I would just say for the exterior overall though, the style, even though it's been touched up, I know this is the next generation, but it's starting to show its age in my opinion. And I think that BMW can step up a little bit in the styling department. A lot of the other brands are doing things that are sharpening up their looks a lot. Look at the style. I personally think it's a little bland. It's not the end of the world, but I personally think that it needs a real workover. So everybody, please do make sure you like, subscribe, and do come back for the next ones. We'll talk to you again. It's Mark here checking out with Exotic Car Play Place.